Well, let's go across now live to Vishnu Shom in Ukraine, because Vishnu, really the big story out of there is the sinking of Russia's biggest warship, Moskva, by a Ukraine missile, claims Ukraine. Russia has a different story. Tell us why it's so important, as Russia TV is saying this is the beginning of World War III, and of course the fact that this could be the biggest warship loss since World War II.
In fact, Sonia, it is one of the largest warships in the world. It is the second largest class of warship in the Russian Navy. This particular warship, and the shots that we actually show you now are shots which we had filmed back in 2003 when the Moskva had sailed from the Black Sea and come all across to the Arabian Sea for exercises with the Indian Navy. It is the largest and most significant naval asset to have actually been lost since the 1982 war between Argentina and the United Kingdom. It is no ordinary warship. It is more than 13,000 tons, fully loaded. It is much more. And the fact of the matter is, despite having multi-layered defensive systems, there were at least 2 missiles fired by the Ukrainians which managed to enter or breach the air defenses which actually exist at 3 levels. First, long-range surface-to-air missiles, then short-range surface-to-air missiles, and a close-in weapon system, all designed to obliterate incoming missiles. But after this, what has taken place is that a massive fire on board. Some reports suggest that hundreds of Russian sailors could in fact be dead. There was an attempt to tow the ship back to Sevastopol in Crimea, but in heavy weather, she ended up sinking. Now, this has resulted, as you mentioned, in this wave of patriotic fervor, call it what you like, in Moscow, with some suggesting that Ukraine needs to be heavily targeted. In fact, today, Kyiv was targeted, the outskirts of Kyiv, where a factory was targeted. The Russians say this factory was one where the Ukrainians have been making their missiles, including the Neptune missiles, which was used to target the Moskva itself. So is this the beginning of a next phase in this war? That remains to be seen, though by and large it appears that a major offensive is imminent, but nobody really knows when that will take place.
Right, and as you said, Vishnu, the scenes we're seeing on Russian TV are really startling. You've got TV hosts breaking down on air, a Russian filmmaker weeping, saying that this should be a cause of war. Remember, Russia, as you said, actually blaming this on an ammunition fire. So they're not admitting that this was actually sunk by Ukraine. Ukraine says this was done by the Ukrainian Air Force. And also the fact remaining that you're in Kyiv as we speak, the capital of Ukraine. What's it like? Because again, after a brief hiatus, you're hearing air raid sirens and Russia claiming that they bombed a plant near Kyiv.
Well, the Russians would have engaged in a missile strike using caliber missiles. Russia doesn't enjoy dominance of the airspace over here, so there are no Russian aircraft overhead at all. That's because they've been shot down in very large numbers. So these large long-range cruise missiles fired by Russia to target this plant. Now, the Ukrainians don't want to talk about the extent of damage at all, or whether or not this was successful. That's part of their strategy. Over here, it's surprisingly life as normal. But in the morning, yes, there were air raid sirens. Late at night, last night, we found out that some parts of Kyiv, electricity had in fact been affected. But today, at the moment, it seems to be normal despite these air raid warnings. And earlier today, I was actually just north of Kyiv in Irpin. That is an area that's been completely devastated. It is an area which is almost unbelievable in terms of the extent of the damage. We have this report from inside a bunker where Ukrainian soldiers were actually hiding and then coming out to fight while the entire building on top was bombed out.
This dog has been lying over here for a while now. It doesn't move at all. I don't know, it's missing its owner or just lying over there. I don't know if it's okay, but it's obviously somebody's dog. What we thought we'd do is, and we found a bunker over here. It's an underground sort of place where somebody was staying when Irpin was being completely bombed. So just sort of entering this place, and as you can see, this is how people survived. There's water which was stored. There was a gas connection of some sort, a stove as well, and obviously no electricity. But somebody had cooked food, over here, was here. Perhaps somebody's maybe still here, just till a couple of days back. And we'll just move through this area where somebody had taken shelter to show you how people lived through this mess. There are a handful of beds over here. That's a full-fledged bunker, in fact. A lot of people would have spent their nights over here while the building above was being bombed. So, and this is actually interconnected to several other rooms. And we won't go any further, but it's interconnected. It's underneath this building. And this just gives you an idea of how people actually lived.
And Vishnu, really that moving ground report. The fact is that today is 51 days since the Russian invasion of Ukraine actually began. The fact that Ukraine has held out for so long in terms of its military is absolutely astounding, but also the sense that where is this actually going, as Putin seems to have called off any pretext or pretense of peace talks, and there's no clear indication of them meeting at all. What's the latest you're hearing on that?
Well, we spoke to the spokesperson of the Ukrainian military, the official spokesperson, and he essentially told us that it's just a matter of time before there is some sort of a renewed offensive in this area. He also spoke about the significance of the loss of the Moskva and what it would mean for Russia. Here's what he said.
What is the situation in the Donbass region? Is an attack by Russia imminent?
Коротке питання, яка зараз ситуація в Донбаському регіоні і чи наступ з боку Росії вже насувається безпосередньо?
Ситуацію, яка наразі склалася на сході України, зокрема в Донецькій і Луганській областей, ми можемо назвати складною, але цілком прогнозованою і контрольованою з боку української армії. Нам відомо, що Російська Федерація стягує туди потужні резерви живої сили, військової техніки. Нам відомо, що формування наступального ядра російської армії фактично переходить в завершальну фазу. Коли такий наступ широкомасштабний почнеться, в які саме дні, я сказати не можу точно, але ворог цілком може зненацька почати штурмові дії, не дочекаючись підходу там певних резервів або завершення формування наступальної армії.
Vishnu, thanks for that. We'll be watching our special report coming up in just a few moments from now at 8:30. But let's just look at what, well, one unexpected fallout has been for India. Today, Egypt has turned to India for wheat supply. Remember that Ukraine and Russia supplied almost 1/3 of wheat exports to the world. And now for Indian farmers and the Indian government, this vacuum is a huge opportunity. Already in Punjab, we're seeing wheat farmers are getting more than the government guaranteed MSP as private players are coming in to purchase their wheat at higher prices.
With Ukraine and Russia, two major wheat exporters locked in a war, Punjab and other wheat-growing states are witnessing a jump not just in the purchase by private buyers, but also in prices higher than the government-guaranteed price or MSP.
ਸਿਰਫ 5 ਰੁਪਏ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵਧਾ ਕੇ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਵੇਟ ਚੱਕ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਇਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੱਧ ਹੋਰ ਪੈਸੇ ਮਿਲਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਆ कम से कम 200 रुपया बोन्स।
थोड़ी गर्मी थोड़ी जल्दी पड़ गई है तो हमारा जो वीट प्रोड्यूसिंग एरियाज हैं उधर जो क्रॉप है वो छोटा रह गया है, विच इज़ वाई देयर इज गोइंग टू बी अ शॉर्टेज, थोड़ा कम मिलेगा माल मार्केट से, क्योंकि रशिया एंड यूक्रेन एक्सपोर्ट नहीं कर रहा अभी वीट, उनके साथ टाइज थोड़े ख़राब हो गए हैं पूरे वर्ल्ड के, इसलिए इंडिया ने अग्री करा है कि इंडिया कई कंट्रीज़ को वीट सप्लाई करेगा अपना, तो इंडिया में हो सकता है उसकी वजह से शॉर्टेज आ जाए।
But it is not private buyers who are flocking to Punjab. Egypt, which earlier imported much of its required wheat stock from Ukraine and Russia, first sent its officials, following which today it designated India as a wheat supplier.
The Commerce Minister tweeted on Friday the good news came that Egypt has allowed India as a wheat supplier and said India is ready to serve the world as farmers have ensured our granaries have overflowed.
जहाँ तक गेहूं का मामला है, निश्चित रूप से गेहूं की उपलब्धता हमारे पास है। वर्तमान परिस्थितियों में दुनिया को भी गेहूं की आवश्यकता है। मैं समझता हूँ दुनिया की आवश्यकता को पूर्ति करने के लिए भारत पूरी तरह तैयार भी है और तत्पर भी है।
As demand grows for Indian wheat in the international market, the price rise of the wheat in grain markets of Punjab is a good news for farmers. But at the same time, the government will also have to monitor the prices of wheat in the domestic market considering the lower yield this year. With Himanshu Mishra in Delhi, in Chandigarh, Mohammad Ghazali for NDTV.
Well, let's move to other news. So, the resignation of BJP stalwart and Minister Ishwarappa, he's meant to hand it over to the Chief Minister this evening, but he's making sure it's a show of strength. Here's Mr. Ishwarappa at a temple. He drove today from his constituency, Shivamoga, in a convoy of cars, got his supporters all out in a political show of strength to make the point that he's giving his resignation, but it's not something he wants to do. He's only doing it to avoid embarrassment for his leaders. Remember, the BJP state executive is meeting tomorrow in Karnataka and the BJP president, JP Nadda, will be there.
BJP stalwart Ishwarappa making sure that even his resignation was a show of strength, accompanied by a convoy of supporters from his district, Shivamoga, as he finally arrived in Bengaluru to submit his resignation as Rural and Panchayati Raj Minister to the Chief Minister. This comes days after he had been named in an FIR as accused number 1 on charges of abetment to suicide of a 40-year-old BJP worker and contractor Santosh Patil.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ನವರು ಇನ್ನು ಯಾರು ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಪ್ರಪಂಚದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರು ಇರಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ವರ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟಿ ಯಾವುದು ಇಲ್ಲ ಅದೇ ಅವರೇ ಡಿಕೆಶಿ ಕುಕ್ಕರ್ ಪ್ರೆಷರ್ ಕುಕ್ಕರ್ ಅದ್ ಮೇನ್ ಕಾರಣ ಅವರೇ ಇಬ್ರು ಸಿದ್ದರಾಮಯ್ಯ ಇದನ್ನಲ್ಲ ಸಿದ್ದರಾಮಯ್ಯ ವರ್ಸ್ಟ್
ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಮಂತ್ರಿ ಸ್ಥಾನಕ್ಕೆ ರಾಜೀನಾಮೆ ಅಳಬೇಡ್ರಿ ನಿರ್ದೋಷಿಯಾಗಿ ಬರ್ತೇನೆ ಮತ್ ಮಂತ್ರಿ ಆಗೇ ಆಗ್ತೇನೆ.
For the Chief Minister, it was a breather. Ishwarappa's initial refusal to resign meant the BJP High Command had to intervene to get him to quit. The fact that the man who died was a BJP worker and that Karnataka contractors said that they have to pay more than 40% cut money for government contracts is a huge political embarrassment for the government.
ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನು ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇದೆ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಪೊಲೀಸರು ತೀರ್ಮಾನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಇವರೇ ತನಿಖೆ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು, ಇವರೇ ಪ್ರಾಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟರ್ಸು, ಇವರೇ ಜಡ್ಜ್ಗಳಾಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಮುಕ್ತವಾಗಿ ತನಿಖೆ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಬಿಡಿ. ಸತ್ಯ ಹೊರಬರ್ತದೆ, ಯಾಕೆ ಗಾಬರಿ ಆಗ್ತಾರೆ? ಸತ್ಯ ಹೊರಬರಲಿ.
Ishwarappa was not ready to resign had the Congress not pushed its protests. Under the zero-tolerance policy for the BJP party, the High Command pressurized Ishwarappa to resign. Now, after the resignation, BJP is on the back foot just ahead of its state executive meeting tomorrow. The Congress is likely to escalate its protests against what they say is now clear proof of corruption by the state government. For the BJP, it's the latest in a series of controversies for the beleaguered state government. With Nehal Kidwai in Bengaluru, Bureau Report, NDTV.
Well, the other big headline, the worry about cases rising in Delhi's capital. India's daily cases remain low, but cases in cities are rising. So, if you just look at the cases, they're still below 1,000 all across India. That's only 949. Deaths are 6. The positivity rate is just 0.26. So, that's good news on overall COVID numbers. But if you go into cities, so for instance, Delhi is currently India's highest contributor to COVID cases. If you just look at the states contributing the most cases right now, Delhi is at 325 cases, followed by Haryana with 170 cases, and then Maharashtra with 103 cases. You're seeing there the initial signs. Now, these cases are still overall at an absolute numbers very low, but initial signs of cases rising. So, it's time to abandon any complacencies and get boosters if you're eligible. With the IPL and Delhi cases rising, COVID has struck. Well, one member of the team physiotherapist, Patrick Farhart, testing positive. Another round of testing will be held tomorrow for all players and all support staff before the game. Pre-match practice today at 5 o'clock was cancelled. There is a Delhi versus Bangalore match tomorrow. Let's see how that goes tomorrow.